Hello, guys. Good morning if you're watching from Mountain Time or Central Time, and good afternoon if you're watching on the East Coast. This is our monthly Costa Rican Vacations webinar. I'm your host, Adam Baker, and today we've got Jack Graycar and Melissa Carpenter. How's it going, guys? How you doing, Jack?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Adam.
No worries. How you doing, Melissa?
Doing well. Nice and sunny here on the coast.
Very, very cool. For those of you that follow our social media channels, Melissa helps out monthly with Costa Rican Vacation social content and Facebook and Instagram. So if you haven't subscribed to those platforms, please do so, as you'll always get updates on promos, specials, some of our best hotels, tours, activities, and resorts, which leads us to the topic of today. It's a big one, and considering we're in the height of the high season here in Costa Rica right now, in the middle of March, I thought it'd be a great idea to discuss with you guys the pros and cons of going to an all-inclusive resort here in Costa Rica, as well as discussing the differences between resorts and boutique hotels, and what are our favorites, which all-inclusive vacation resorts do we recommend, and resorts that are perhaps not all-inclusive. So we've got an awful lot to get through today. We've got a bunch of great questions lined up, and we're also going to discuss our favorites towards the end. And of course, as ever, we're going to have a Q&A session live in around 45 minutes. So hopefully for those of you that have arrived on time, there was a mistake. We are now technically on Mountain Time in Costa Rica, although in Costa Rica year round, we're on Central Time, but you guys have just changed your clock. So hopefully you're joining us at the right time. And if not, we are going to relive this webinar tomorrow on YouTube. So don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch all the questions back. If you have more questions for us later, you can always ask us in the description box below. But for the time being, get your questions in right here in the Q&A function. We'll be responding some of them live on air if we can. And then we will make sure to have at least 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the webinar to get to your live questions. And they don't have to be just focused on all-inclusive travel. Anything at all regarding travel to Costa Rica. Perhaps you're thinking about coming to the Osa Peninsula. Maybe you're looking to find squirrel monkeys. Where should you go? Ask us. Melissa and Jack will get to those questions shortly. So in the meantime, let's get started for everybody that's watching. One of the biggest questions that we get asked, we get a lot of, as you can imagine, leads and interest clients wanting an all-inclusive experience because they've had great times somewhere else. Maybe they think they're getting a good deal if you pay for everything in once. That's not always the case. But before we get to some of the main pros and cons, Jack, let's start with you. What is typically included in an all-inclusive resort in Costa Rica?
In Costa Rica, at an all-inclusive resort, it's going to be everything on site at that resort. So all your meals, your alcoholic beverages, your soft drinks, all that's going to be included. They have activities on site. Those will be included as well, typically. But it does differ from your typical all-inclusive package where it might include flights, your tours, activities, transportation, and these things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's something I wanted to bring up. Melissa, how common do you think it is when people search for information from us that they think we're offering a complete package? And then how do you explain that in a bit more detail?
Absolutely. So we do, of course, offer experiences off-site as well. There's lots to do here in Costa Rica, exploring the volcanoes, zip lining, ATVs. So there's things that can be done off-site, and we are able to arrange that and get everything while in Costa Rica included in your package. However, flights isn't something that we handle. A lot of times people do have their own points that they're looking to use. There's different flight deals that aren't necessarily included in the overall package. And that allows us to also give kind of a more custom experience. So instead of just a cookie cutter package coming from Costco or the likes, you get more of a curated experience looking for what your family or what you're looking to do.
Yeah, and exactly that. And it's really important that we do, as like Costa Rican Vacations, offer a complete package, like you mentioned, in terms of transfers, activities, tours, resorts, accommodation, whether it's a boutique hotel, a resort, or an all-inclusive. But the flights you do need to book on your own. We can't help with that, but that's ultimately up to you. And that's where it differs. When you think I want a complete all-inclusive package, one payment, off you go on vacation. Like Jack says, all the activities and most of the all-inclusives are paid for, covered, all your meals. breakfast, lunch, and dinner, usually snacks, usually alcohol. That's one of the differences, is it not, Jack, as well? There's a couple of boutique places around the country in different regions that are meal inclusive, and meal inclusive simply means not alcohol. Is that right?
Mhm. That's correct. Yeah. And sometimes those will include activities as well. Typically just not the alcohol, like you said. And typically that's because they're in such a secluded place that there's not much to dine at off-site. So
Yeah.
they go ahead and include the meals for you.
Yeah, especially if you're going to areas like the Osa Peninsula, deep in the
Mhm.
rainforest. Usually those kind of boutique hotel experiences include breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks, sometimes incredible activities. But usually, yeah, if you're looking for the fun, the liquor, uh, lower shelf, upper shelf, you're going to have to pay for that yourself. Okay, so that kind of gives you guys a little bit of an idea about what when we are referring to all-inclusive resorts over packages. We're going to be focusing on the resorts because we get a lot of interest. We sell a bunch. And of course, the title of this webinar is the pros and cons. Now, we did a video about this a few years ago, and there are a lot. So, Melissa, if I asked you the really general question, what are the pros and cons between an all-inclusive resort and a resort, or even a smaller boutique hotel? How do you answer that question?
Sure. Well, with the all-inclusive resort, as we've discussed, it's nice and easy. You arrive, everything's taken care of for you. You don't have to worry about where you're heading for dinner. All the meals are there, alcoholic beverages, drinks on site, different activities. Typically, we have several on really nice beaches, so you can just sit back, relax, and everything's kind of done there for you. So that's a definite plus of the all-inclusives. And then as far as other experiences, if you're looking for a little bit more boutique, that, of course, can be a great option as well. And if you do want maybe a breakfast inclusive property, there's wonderful areas to explore in Costa Rica where we can recommend local dining, nice towns to check out, more kind of local areas that are give you a different experience off the resort as well.
Awesome. And then I agree with all of that. Jack, how do you answer the same way? Do you establish it more? Is that the direct question you get asked? Or do you find yourself, when someone immediately inquires on one of our web pages looking for one of the bigger 5-star all-inclusive resorts, you get that client who's interested. Do you immediately ask them what they're looking for? How do you break it down? And do you then direct away? Or what dictates whether or not you keep them with the all-inclusive, or suggest they mix it up a little bit?
Yeah, it depends on what they're looking for as a whole. A lot of our travelers come most commonly for a week and do a bit of a combo trip, and they might get in that boutique experience in the inland destination that they go visit and get in a ton of activities, and then they just want to relax at the beach. In that case, I think an all-inclusive is great, but if they want to be somewhere and be able to go off-site and dine off-site and get a more local, full, well-rounded experience, then I would recommend something different.
Yeah. I remember it's been about 15 years since I was planning vacations as well. But I think a lot of the time there's a stereotype that if you go to an all-inclusive resort, you're going to just go to one place, you're going to have activities on site, going to get all the food you need, probably drink an awful lot, take it easy. But you don't necessarily get a really solid experience of the culture in the country. And I know that if you're coming for at least a week, which is pretty standard, maybe 7-day vacation, Melissa, do you find it quite common that maybe people are looking for a week at the beach? They think they can go to the rainforest, wherever that may be, or the volcano, whichever one might be close, for like day trips, as opposed to actually splitting their trip up into 2 spaces.
Absolutely. So with that, if you want the all-inclusive experience, as you mentioned, just kind of relaxing, enjoying the beach, that type of thing, there is possibility to do day trips if you just want to spend a week at the beach. But how the Guanacaste coast, which is where a lot of our beach all-inclusives are set up, it tends to be a bit of a drive to get to some of those kind of more tropical, like rainforest feel of experiences. So to cut down the driving in between, we recommend maybe checking out the rainforest volcano area to start, and then ending at the all-inclusive. So you can start with the adventures, enjoy a little bit of the rainforest, and then still get that nice relaxation by the beach at the end.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about where you find the properties in a few questions time, because it's kind of, segmented to the northwest of the country. It does mean that because of their location, getting to and from the other areas like the Arenal volcano, the adventure areas, more of the jungly vibe, the rainforest up north, that it's very, very difficult to do from a day. If you're willing to do 4 hours drive in the morning, spend a few hours and then come all the way back, you're going to have a 12-hour day, which is going to be exhausting. There are a
Right.
few closer volcanoes, which are fun day tours. But if I feel like if you do break your vacation to maybe 3 days of activities, 4 days by the beach, you'll generally have a very good time. And I think, Jack, if correct me if I'm wrong, that's what a lot of clients really provide positive feedback on after the trip. You go, wow,
Mhm.
I'm really glad you suggested that.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think that's a big separating factor for Costa Rica, that it's not like Mexico or the Dominican Republic in the sense that when you go there, typically you're going to an all-inclusive and you're not leaving that property. Whereas Costa Rica is very safe. Me, Adam, and Melissa, we all lived
Yeah.
here many years. So we dine in local towns all the time, and thus our travelers do too. And it's kind of, I tell my clients, it gives more of a local, authentic European feel in a tropical paradise here in Costa Rica. So
Yeah. Really good stuff, guys. I mean, we're going to, all the questions related in this webinar kind of discuss the pros and cons depending on the answers and what you guys might be looking for. I'm going to share a link with you here in the chat, which is a video we did a couple of years ago, and I think they're still relevant. They are the pros and cons summarized on YouTube. So if you want to check that out, please do so. I've got our trusted marketing colleagues, Wendy and Pablo, helping me out in the background, providing some of these great links. And there's a small video on some of the best all-inclusive resorts that we're going to discuss as well today. So let's jump into a little bit of what they offer and how that might vary. So I've not been to many all-inclusives, as you mentioned, around Central America or the Caribbean, but we've been to a couple here in Costa Rica. Melissa, in terms of what the resorts offer, obviously, usually one or two or three restaurants for different dining experiences, depending on the resort that you're staying at. What other activities can you expect more or less? And how does it vary? Does it vary because of region or the size? Or is there different price points? What can guests expect?
Sure. So for most of the all-inclusives here in Guanacaste, they are located on a beach. Many of the beaches tend to be quite calm. So one common activity that you can expect at most of the all-inclusives would be non-motorized water sports. So if you want to maybe do some snorkeling, check out some kayaks, paddleboarding, that type of activity is a nice way to enjoy the ocean from, of course, the lounge chairs, but then also getting out in the water and having a little bit of activity for the day as well.
And Jack, anything you'd like to add? How does that? Because obviously the beaches are, I think, one of the biggest commonalities, right? Access to the sun, sea, and sand, beach activities.
yeah, like Mel said, they're typically going to have kayaks or stand-up paddle boards on site that you can use. The Westin, I know, has trails on site, and a lot of other properties also have trails on site that you can hike, and they'll do guided tours, I believe. Some have golf courses and many different activities you can do.
So you mentioned one of the big ones, which we knew was going to come up. We love to sail the Western, Playa Conchal, up in Guanacaste, as Melissa mentioned. It's about 45 minutes from the Liberia International Airport, maybe slightly longer depending on traffic. But that's one of the top resorts. Great access to Conchal Beach, which looks like white sand, but it's crushed white shells, beautiful turquoise water. Like you mentioned, Jack has a great golf course on site, access to tennis courts. So if you're into sports, very easily snorkeling because of the type of beach. So that's not always the case. Some resorts will be different enclaves around Guanacaste. But that's a really good one in terms of the activities, but also nightlife. So I know sometimes when people are in Mexico, Cabo, or perhaps you're in Dominican Republic, you get evening events. And I know the Western is one of the all-inclusive resorts that still offers this compared to some of the smaller all-inclusive resorts. So as well as your dinner, your dining options, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is it still 6 restaurants at the Western? Or maybe is it 5 or 6, I think these days, I'm not entirely
I believe
sure.
it's still 6.
It's still 6?
6.
Because you've got loads of dining options as well because of the size. So of course you get more amenities right on site, including activities for kids, but also for families. Jack, I've got a question here. As we discuss different brands and names, what are the kind of the best all-inclusive resorts here in the country that are ideal for families? Maybe you can go in why the Western is something that we always recommend families first.
Yeah, the Westin, of course, I think is the best for families. They have a kids club which is not too common nowadays, I've found, at least here in Costa Rica. They have a kids club, the largest pool in Costa Rica, tons of things for the kids to do. Another one would be Margaritaville. Margaritaville has a great activities they offer on site. They're also on beautiful Playa Flamingo, which Playa Conchal is regarded as the best beach, but I think I'm in the minority, but I think Flamingo's a little better,
Uh,
in my opinion.
uh,
And then I think Planet Hollywood is very good for families as well.
I
can you,
can.
yeah, go
Mhm.
for it, Melissa.
Yeah, I was just going to add on a little bit. Something fun about Margaritaville that I really like is it does have kind of a smaller feel versus some of the larger all-inclusives. So if you are hesitant about, having all your kids there, it's a nice kind of area where they even have like a games room with popcorn machines. There's a little spot where the kids can watch movies. There's plenty to do, but it's not overwhelming. So I think that's a great option. And then Planet Hollywood, in addition to Wonderful Kids Club, we spoke briefly about the nightlife. I think that's also another great option if you're looking for activities in the evening. They have live music, they do different shows. It's a really good one, not just for younger children, but also if maybe you have teenagers in the family or adults as well. There's a lot going on at that property, and they do have a wide variety of restaurants on site also.
Really good points. And these are some great properties that we're discussing here. So in the chat, guys, you've got a link directly to the Western Reserva Conchal Resort and its beach, which is beautiful, as Jack mentioned. But also, there's the Margarita link. And Flamingo Beach is stunning. If you want sunsets, Flamingo Beach, lovely white sand, really, really good for swimming and snorkeling.
Yep.
Melissa, you touched on it there. A lot of people like to ask the difference between the Western and Margaritaville. How do you summarize it? Because they are at different price points, they're at different sizes, they're in different locations. How do you answer that question?
One of the first things that will come to mind is size. Again, the Westin is more of the larger, sprawling resort. It has that giant pool. It is on a natural reserve, so there's hiking available on site, the golf club. So it is much larger of a property. As far as the beaches go, comparing between the two, both are absolutely stunning. Conchal does have the white sand appearance, but as Adam mentioned, it's actually millions and millions of tiny little shells, which is really cool to see. At Playa Flamingo, you have natural white sand beach. It is very calm as well. Sometimes you get some waves for a little bit of boogie boarding. Not as much really snorkeling on that beach. It's more of kind of swimming and just enjoying the water. But the area also, I think, is important to mention. Conchal, because it's on the reserve, is more secluded versus Margaritaville, where you're just a short walk from, sometimes they have an evening market. There's a brand new marina with a little ice cream shop. You can see the boats. So that area is a little bit more flexible in terms of exploring off the resort as well.
Yeah.
For Margaritaville.
Yeah, no, really good points. And I think this is the thing that a lot of people might have a preconceived idea that if you do go to Margaritaville, it's a much smaller resort experience. It's only got one restaurant and the bar at the front. So you have, if you're staying there for 3 or 4 or 5 days, you do have more limited options as to where you're going to eat. There are a couple of places nearby, but the town of Flamingo is really, really small, as opposed to, like you mentioned, Jack, because of the size of the Western, you don't really leave the resort in terms of going to see the local town. It's really, really packed. There's a tiny town next door, right? Brasilito, if you cross over to the other bridge, very local, very Tico town, but not something you're going to necessarily find many activities to do outside. And I know if you're at Margaritaville, you can walk along the road. You've got the huge beach, got a couple of different restaurants that pop up along that road as well. So it's really important to think about, okay, how many restaurants do you want access to? How many on-site activities? Because of the size of the Western, you do have more activities on site. I think Margaritaville has 1 tennis court as opposed to 6, for example, at the Western, the golf course, the trails, as you mentioned, the different nightlife. And because of the size, you'll probably not necessarily feel as overwhelmed with people if you're traveling at the high season or the peak season at Christmas at the Western compared to something like Margaritaville. I know both of those properties, Jack, they're not particularly modern. They've been around for maybe over 10 years, both of them. Did you mention, I believe, was it the Dreams or Secrets, which was the one that you made? Sorry, Planet Hollywood. Planet Hollywood, in comparison, is a lot more modern. So, Jack, if I was thinking about taking my family to either Planet Hollywood or the Western, what would govern my decision?
Yeah, so I'd say it's mainly resort versus beach. Planet Hollywood is a great resort, tons of restaurants, big pools, the entertainment. But the beach there is a bit lacking, I'll say. I'd say it's below average for a beach in Costa Rica, whereas
Right.
the Westin, like we've been speaking about, has the best beach in Costa Rica, or top three for sure. So it depends. If you want to be on a beautiful beach, you're definitely going to want to go with the Westin. But if you're okay just kicking it at the resort, Planet Hollywood might be better for you.
Yeah, really valuable information. That's kind of the only way you get to know, right? By kind of asking, because my job is to market these places and make them look really attractive. I'm going to send a link here to Planet Hollywood as well, so you guys can check that out. And I guess this is what some of the properties know, like you just mentioned, Margaritaville, Flamingo Beach, stunning. Conchal Beach, really, really well known as well. Yeah, good points. Guys, thank you for getting your questions in. We've got a couple of questions. Constance, thanks for getting in touch with us. Laura's also got some questions which we will get to as well. So thanks for these questions. Keep them coming in. We're right now discussing family-related all-inclusives. But of course, if you're not coming with the family, maybe the kids are staying at home, or maybe there are no kids yet. Maybe this is your honeymoon, or you want a romantic getaway. When it comes to all-inclusive adults-only options in Costa Rica, Melissa, which ones do you recommend and how do you separate them?
Sure. I would say it 100% depends on the type of experience you're looking for, because we do have a couple that are very like quiet, relaxed, fully, just focus on the beach. It's not too busy, not too much going on. So that's nice if you're looking for a peaceful getaway, maybe getting away from the kids or not wanting any, screaming around you and looking for something peaceful on the coast. That's an option. And then we do have another one that's a bit more going on, and that's in Samara. Azura has, I would say, a bit more in the way of activities, a bit of a younger feel, right on the beach, of course, as well. And then we have Secrets and Occidental in Papagayo. So there's lots of options, really just kind of depends on the type of experience. If you're looking for a quieter getaway or a bit more of kind of a lively experience.
Good. I mean, that's an awful lot that you've listed there. What I'll do is I'll put in the chat, I'll put adult only options, and I'll start adding a few so you guys can kind of take a look in your own time. Azura is a really interesting one. Azura, a little bit further down the coast. So if you're willing to do a slightly longer transfer, if you're flying into Liberia, LIR in the north, or obviously coming into San Jose and mixing it up with a stay at the rainforest and the jungle. Secrets is a really good one as well. We are going to wait till the end for most of the questions, but Jessica Cooney, thank you, Jessica, for your question. I've got a question here. Jessica, Gary's asking. I've got another couple of questions from a couple of anonymous people. Great questions. Somebody anonymously asked, and this is relevant right now, this is why I'm asking it. Are all the all-inclusive resorts on the beach, or can you also stay in the rainforest, for example, as well? So obviously what you've just listed, Melissa, and we've mentioned it a couple of times, most of the all-inclusives are kind of found around what we call the Gold Coast in Costa Rica, the north of the country in Guanacaste. Most of them are beach affiliated, right? You don't really find all-inclusive resorts inland, mountain areas, rainforests. Melissa, I guess that's why we kind of suggest that you try and mix up your vacation. Is that right?
Right. There is one that we have, a property that we work with close to the Arenal volcano, which is Montaña de Fuego. It has hot springs on site. They do more of kind of the meal package with drinks included. They do have some small trails there as well. So if you want a fully all-inclusive trip, there is still a way to do that, to combine starting in the rainforest, and then we could end at an all-inclusive on the beach. So you could have all-inclusive in both spaces. Or as Jack mentioned before, many of the great properties that are more secluded on the Osa Peninsula, they do have all meals included. So it still kind of takes care of the meal portion and less to worry about as far as that goes.
Yeah, it's a good point. And Jack, I mean, isn't it really important also to mention when we plan vacations, we do try and match up the level of quality between your hotels. Or if you're going to go from like adventure, maybe you spend slightly less time in the hotel. That might be a step down in terms of luxury or levels of comfort. And then you certainly step up to your next property. If you're staying in 3 locations, you're visiting for 9 to 10 days, they keep getting better. We never want to put you in a 4-star beautiful resort and then take you to a step down. So as you mentioned, Melissa, Montaña de Fuego is a lovely option. It's not particularly super luxurious, but it is an all-inclusive option that would then step up really well to something like the Secrets, Dreams, or the Westin, for example. But trying to mix the experience, Jack, from going from like the all-inclusive all the way down to the Osa Peninsula for a meal inclusive, we very rarely do that, right? Because they're very different, opposing experiences.
They're very far apart. So
Yeah.
you have to take multiple flights to get over there, or a private flight, or be in the car for 8 or 10 hours.
Yeah. So it's
Mhm.
so guys, yeah, again, the person who asked us is anonymous. You don't find many all-inclusives generally. We think that maybe the market's shifting and there are resorts that are trying to apply an all-inclusive option. So it's easier for you guys if you don't want the stress of, worrying. But I think it's also important to point out, I'm just thinking out loud here, Melissa, when you go to somewhere like the Arenal volcano and you're in the rainforest, you don't spend that much time at the hotel. The whole point of being there is, right, to do incredible activities, zip lining, canyoneering, whitewater rafting, ATVing. Very rarely are you probably going to be at the hotel, at least over lunchtime, as most tours happen after breakfast. So, and a lot of the tours also include lunch. Plus, maybe you want the freedom to pick and choose where you want to go out. Do you want to go out to the local town of La Fortuna? Maybe you're in the cloud forest in Monteverde. You've got loads of restaurants. So this is probably the reason you don't see as many all-inclusives inland, right?
Yep, absolutely. And actually, you mentioned the La Fortuna town. That's one of my absolute favorites in Costa Rica. Super cute, very safe. There's the main little town square with the fountain, fantastic views of the volcano in the background. Walk around with the family, walk around in the evening, hear some live music. So it's absolutely a wonderful option to just do a breakfast inclusive and explore the town, have that flexibility to try some local food, branch out a little bit, maybe of your comfort zone. As your local experts, we're happy to recommend some great spots that you can check out. But if you are a must-have all-inclusive, it's nice to know that there are options such as Montaña de Fuego that have, hot springs on site. They do still have the food included. So if you did just want to be there and relax, it's an option. But I would personally recommend maybe going more the breakfast inclusive route, enjoying the excursions, the experiences, checking out the town square in the evening, and then having a little bit more flexibility there for sure.
Yeah. Really, really good points, especially on, where the regions are. Before we leave the adult only, I think it is important to mention that the Western Resort does have a Royal Beach Club section, which focuses on adult only as well. So like you mentioned, Jack, if you do want the fantastic famous beach, you want access to 6 restaurants, you want a lovely room, but you don't necessarily want to be in an area where there's lots of kids screaming or loads going on, you can stay in the Royal section, right? How does that differ slightly?
Yeah, so that's going to be adults only pool area. They have an adults only restaurant there as well. And then the rooms are, of course, adults only. There's a club area as well that's adults only. So you can kind of seclude yourself away from the kids while you're at the West still.
Yeah, and still take advantage of all the amenities that
Right.
the place really operates with. Fantastic, guys. Keep the questions coming in. Gary, you've asked a couple of questions. I appreciate it. We'll get to those very shortly. We've discussed, I have a question here, which is, which region in Costa Rica has the highest concentration? I know we've gone into this in quite a bit of detail. I think one of the reasons Guanacaste in the north is where it is, not just because the beaches primarily, are a beautiful setting. There's a number of other brand resorts as well. We've got the Waldorf Astoria coming in very soon. We've got the Four Seasons. We've got the Andaz, the JW Marriott. These are resorts that are not necessarily all inclusive, but are very popular in the area, have been here for 10, 15, 20 years. The Liberia International Airport, our airport in the north of the country, gives you really easy access within, anything from 20 minutes to an hour, depending on where you're going. So you land and you get to the regions very quickly. I think you did mention Azura, Melissa, and that's technically in the same coastline, just a little bit further down on that Pacific coast. But that's really where they are concentrated. A separate question that has come up a couple of times here, Jack, is tipping expected in all-inclusive resorts? Considering you've paid for everything, what's the policy there?
Typically for food, you don't have to worry about tipping, but it is customary to give a few dollars to the bellboy helping out with your bags, and the cleaning ladies who are coming to turn down your room every day. There's a few dollars expected there. But for meals, which would be the heavy portion of the tips, no.
Yeah.
Not at an all-inclusive.
Yeah. A good point. And I guess with an all-inclusive resort, that's part of the package that we offer. So Melissa, when you are traveling with us, your package is fully included because we take care of everything: private transfers, tours, activities, all the accommodation. We still recommend obviously tipping your drivers, right?
Right. Yeah. So I would say get in the great private service get to the all inclusive. And then, of course, when you're on experiences offsite as well, for those guides in those situations, I would recommend tipping. But again, you won't need it for the meals. That's already taken care of. If you want to pass a couple extra dollars to the bartender, doing a great job, that type of thing, of course, they won't say no, but it's not expected or required on the resort.
Excellent. Okay, good stuff. Hey, so on to a big question, which is interesting. And I think this also, this topic of weather, when is the best time of year to visit Costa Rica for an all-inclusive vacation, talks to why it's such a nice part of the country, Guanacaste, because it sees a lot of sunshine, does it not, Melissa? Oh, I think Melissa did let us know that she was having a few issues with electricity outside. So Jack, I'll throw it over to you. Discussing Guanacaste, is that the best time? Oh, sorry, when is the best time to come? And is it just the dry season because of the weather, or what do you recommend?
No, actually. And after living here for many years, I have come to like the rainy season more actually than the dry season. But that being said, I have tended to see that my travelers like the dry season a bit more. So our dry season runs December through April, and then our rainy season is May through November. And our rainy season is typically quick and fast shower in the afternoon, and it's out. But typically mornings are still beautiful. You can go do your excursions. And yeah, my personal, if you're asking me the best time,
Yeah,
it's the last 2 weeks of November and the first 2 weeks of December. Where you still have country still very beautiful and green from the rainy season. The wildlife is still active, but you're not getting as much rain as the end of the rainy season, like in September, October, when it's really coming down. And you still have the rates that are still low before they go up for Christmas. So that's
really
my
great. Yeah, great
focus.
info. I
Mhm,
wholeheartedly agree. I'm going to send a link about Guanacaste if you want to learn a bit more about the weather in this region, which is where most of the all-inclusives are. The
mhm,
transitional periods, as you mentioned, at the end of each stage, especially at the end of the green season, is
mhm,
not only lovely weather, it's fractionally cooler. Everything is in bloom, right? So it's still really green, more wildlife, fewer travelers, like you mentioned, but also generally slightly better rates. Before, if rates and price is an issue for you at that time of year, you're coming in a time, late November, early December, kids are still at school. You're not dealing with the two crazy peak weeks where rates go up 40, 50%, depending on the hotel. And then, of course, it gets slammed with people. Um, what would you say, Jack, is one of the downsides about coming in the dry season?
For me personally, the dry season is, like you mentioned, there's going to be a lot more people. So, like right now, a lot of people are coming for spring break.
Yeah.
Resorts are going to be full. As well as for me personally, in March and April, it gets a little hot. I'm originally
It's
from
right.
Ohio. It
So
gets a
hot.
little hot for me when I'm at the beach. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
live up in the mountains of you, Adam, and
Yeah.
where it's a little cooler. But yeah, those would be my two negatives if there are any.
I mean, it really is. I know people come down, especially if maybe you're traveling from northern US or Canada or northern Europe, where it is still snowing, even late in the ski season, right? Late March, even early
Mhm,
April. And you come down here, there's a difference between coming down when it's like 38 degrees Celsius, like 100, 102. If it is that hot, don't forget your sunblock because it does get scorching. Plus, if
mhm,
you are traveling in March and April, everything is a little bit more kind of with the Texas vibe. Everything's a little bit burnt. It's not as
mhm.
green. There's
It's a
not
good
that
point.
much
Yeah.
water. It hasn't rained for a long time, which is
Hmm.
why it's so nice traveling at the end of November, early December. Temperatures are still really, 90s, right, in Guanacaste.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And if you do travel, Melissa, right, in the green season, off season, rainy season, anything from late June, July, August through September, October, it is really refreshing to see some of the tropical rain, as well as
Mhm.
enjoying less tourists and better prices, right?
Sure. So for me personally, I do live here in Guanacaste, and as we mentioned, it gets hot in, March, April definitely is more dry as well. So it might not be quite as tropical as what you typically think of. During the rainy season, I actually love the rainy season, or we call it the green season here, because again, it's all so lush. The rain doesn't usually last too long, kind of cools everything off. It's similar to, I say, like Florida summer weather, if you're familiar with that, where you might get a shower here and there in the afternoon, but overall, it's still really nice, sunny, and green as well.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic.
Hmm.
I'm a big fan of the green season. I know sometimes
Hmm.
people think that it's going to rain loads because we're in the tropics, But like you
Right.
said, Jack, it really is lovely mornings, early afternoons. Maybe you see a downpour. But as I mentioned at the start of the question, because it's Guanacaste, you tend to see 365 days a year of sun at some point. It's not like the Osa Peninsula or the Southern Central Pacific, where it does rain more, where you see our primary rainforest. It's very secondary dry forest up in the north of the country. So there's a lot of different climate zones in Costa Rica, and this one is a lot flatter, so it is a lot hotter, and you don't see as much vegetation. So certainly something to think about. Guys, I've actually tagged a couple of videos here on Guanacaste and the best time of year to visit. So if you do want to look at the descriptions in the chat live, you can do so. If you're watching this after the live webinar, those links are also below in the description box in YouTube. So do check them out. A couple more questions before we get to our Q&A session. Got a bunch of questions flying in. Thanks, guys. Keep them going. You've got about another 10, 15 minutes before we start getting to them. An interesting question that does sometimes come up. Melissa, how do all-inclusive resorts deal with dietary restrictions? Are they super fixed based on restaurants, or are they actually flexible?
A little bit flexible, kind of a mix of both, I would say. And of course, it's going to depend heavily on which resort you're at based on how many restaurants you have, the different options. I would say with all-inclusives, it does tend to be a little bit more up to the client to, especially if you're at the buffet, deciding what works best for you. Most of the buffet style options do now have gluten-free, vegan, different selections where you can, find what works best for you. But it really, I would say, is pretty resort specific, depending on the number of restaurants and styles of food available.
Yeah, awesome. And I think that's the big thing, the number of restaurants, right? If you've got more restaurants, you as a client can be you've more flexibility and choose what to eat. And again, I think sometimes it's a buffet. You've always got a buffet option, so you can pick and choose there. I find Costa Rica and most resorts are really kind of helpful. They want to be flexible. They want to provide great service, right, Jack? So most of the time, they're going to be as forthcoming and as helpful as they can be within reason.
Yeah, I haven't had a traveler actually come back and say, "Oh, we struggled with this or that, finding things on the menu." I haven't come across that.
Good stuff. Well, there is a link, guys. We do have a page on vegetarians and vegans if it helps. Not just all-inclusive heavy, but that will focus if you are interested on the subject. Okay, so before we discuss favorite resorts, favorite non-all-inclusive resorts, favorite resorts for both of you, one question I wanted to ask Jack, I'll throw it over to you. How should the theme of your vacation impact the decision of choosing all-inclusive resort over boutique hotel? For example, if you're in a honeymoon situation, you've got a preconceived idea of what an all-inclusive resort could be, or you're traveling with families, how important is it to chat with an expert and try and make a fair decision as to what will be the best experience for you?
Oh, it's very important, Adam, because it's so many different ranges from boutique the difference in experience that a boutique hotel offers versus a resort versus an all-inclusive resort is night and day. Very, very different. So it really depends on what the client is looking for from their experience. And then I'd make a recommendation. For example, honeymooners, in my experience, typically don't want all-inclusives. They want to be in a small little boutique place, have that more intimate experience. They're seeing the same workers at the hotel each day. But families, a lot of my families want that all-inclusive. We don't want to worry about feeding the kids each day. We need the all-inclusive, and makes perfect sense for them, right? So it really, really depends, and it's really, really important to talk to an expert.
I agree, and I think it's not that, Melissa, I always say it's not that they don't offer really good service at the all-inclusive resort, but when you've got more than 1,000 guests staying, in 500 rooms in an all-inclusive, over 25 rooms where the service people, as Jack just mentioned, the same workers, the same staff members every day know your name and your preferences, and sometimes you even have a concierge private to you. That kind of service and connection is kind of unique, right?
Absolutely. And Costa Rica really has so much to offer that I do feel it's super important to have that personalized experience. And a good thing and bad thing about Costa Rica is there's tons of information out there, which can also lead to a little information overwhelm as far as what's the best fit for you. So I think it does really help to talk to someone who's here, who's seen the resorts, kind of understands, the different aspects of what might work best for what you're looking for versus hours and hours of searching and looking at different, websites and videos. We're happy to answer any questions. And I think there's pros and cons to both, but it, again, just depends what you're looking for.
Yeah, so true. And like we mentioned at the beginning, depending on the resort and what you want, whether it's beach, whether it's amenities, whether it's modernity over classic, there is a little bit of something for everyone, even when it comes to resorts and all inclusives.
Right.
Like you say, pros and cons everywhere. Great stuff. Okay, so the last couple of questions, still got a couple of questions coming in. I've just shared some honeymoon packages with you if you are interested, guys, in specifically honeymoon. Do check those out if you wish. So I want to ask you both, I want your top 3 all-inclusives, your favorites, and why, well, not necessarily why, we don't have that much time, but some of the perks of each one, but then also your top 3 resorts that you really should consider that are not necessarily all-inclusive. So Jack, what are your top 3 all-inclusive resorts that you tend to favor?
So my top 3 all-inclusive resorts, I think the first one is obvious, would be the Westin. I think we've been discussing it. It's the best there is, in my opinion. And next, if you can afford it, they do have bed and breakfast and all-inclusive options, would be Andaz. Andaz is spectacular. And then my last recommendation for adults only folks, I would recommend Secrets.
Awesome. And we haven't mentioned Secrets or Andaz too much. Andaz being located in the Papagayo Gulf, beautiful access to a couple of beaches close to the airport. How does the Andaz differ from Secrets?
So Andaz is not adults only. I'd say it is more geared towards adults, but it is not adults only property. You can have families there. And it's a little more unique. It's more secluded in the jungle there in Papagayo. They have multiple beaches on site, and I'd say it is a step up from Secrets.
Nice, which is why you have your 1, 2, 3. And
Yep.
whereabouts is Secrets located?
Secrets is also there in the Papagayo Peninsula, just different location, kind of looking at Andaz actually.
Okay, awesome. Well, guys, I'm sharing a link with both of those properties here. Melissa, is it the same? Is it slightly different? Do you want to throw a curveball in for us?
Another one I would throw in there, just because of how much it has to offer for all ages, would be Planet Hollywood. The beach may not be spectacular, but you can, of course, do day trips on the water. We offer one that goes to different private islands, so you can still get, the great coastal beach experience. So I really like Planet Hollywood for an all-inclusive option. The sunsets at Margaritaville, the best you'll see in the country, in my personal opinion. Love that place. I like that it has a little bit of a smaller feel, and the beach is just stunning. And then for all-inclusive, for adults only, I would go with Azura. I think it has a nice kind of environment. The beach is beautiful, and they have lovely swim out rooms as well. So that's kind of a nice special extra for an adults only getaway.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great list of 5 there, and I'm going as fast as I can to this list, even though the links are there. But then you've got Andaz, Secrets, Planet Hollywood, the Westin, Azura, great options, and all slightly different as well, which is quite nice. Melissa, in terms of resorts that are not all inclusive that you really should be throwing in the mix, what are your top 3?
While continuing on the kind of beach properties, Guanacaste Coast, a boutique property that I absolutely love that is adults only would be Casa Chameleon. It has a stunning infinity pool, very private. They have little bungalows, great for a romantic getaway, whether it's honeymoon, anniversary, just really special. And then by the volcano, my personal favorite is RNL Springs Resort. I think it's great for everyone, for families, couples, hot springs on site, great volcano views, and definitely a property to check out. And then I would say for Manuel Antonio, an area we haven't discussed as much because it doesn't have the all-inclusives really. The family-friendly one with more monkeys than people would be Costa Verde. It has a different vibe. It's definitely not modern or upscale feeling. It's more rustic, authentic Costa Rica, but there's a lot to do there, and the wildlife is absolutely fantastic. So those would be my 3.
I really like it. And you've covered 3 great areas of the country. We haven't quite touched on Las Catalinas with the boutique resort of Casa Chameleon, which I'm putting in the link here. The Springs Resort has been around now for a number of years, incredibly popular in the RNL area. And that's like, I always call it Disneyland in Costa Rica. 7 levels, loads of stuff to do on site. Not necessarily not all inclusive. As mentioned, you're probably going to be out even at lunchtime, even though there's so much to do on site.
Right.
Great for families and couples. Their honeymoon suites are lovely. Loads of hot springs, a natural river flowing through the property. Highly recommended. I'm going to add that one in there as well. And then, of course, Manuel Antonio. Like you mentioned, we've discussed it many times in different webinars, but not an area, again, in the Central Pacific that has all-inclusive resorts. smaller
Right.
ones like you mentioned, but a really, really good spot. I'll add all of these in for you guys right here. Jack, anything else? What about your top resorts that are not all inclusive?
Yeah, I'd say to kind of piggyback off Mel doing different locations in Costa Rica, up in Guanacaste, a great resort that's not all inclusive is Tamarindo Diria. I think it's great price to value, great location, being beachfront right there in the center of town. And you can kind of get the resort and local experience at the same time because you are there in town. At the volcano, I really like Nayara. Nayara Resorts is three different properties jammed into one, but you can't go wrong with any property there. Very, very spectacular experience. Not enough to say about Nayara.
Yeah,
And in
true.
Manuel Antonio, one that holds a special place in my heart is Parador Resort and Spa. That's where I came down. I visited for a week and then I moved down 7 months later. So
Nice.
that's my personal favorite there in Manuel Antonio.
For those people arriving for the first time, and it's not a property we discuss a lot. We've been selling Parador for 25 years, as long as the business has been in operation. Try and describe. Can you describe Parador a little bit for those of you who have never heard of Parador?
Yeah, so Parador is in the hills of Manuel Antonio on Punta Quepos, looking at the national park, and tons of monkeys crawling around the property. They'll be surprising you at the hotel, jumping on your balcony. Um, the beach is right down the hill. So while Manuel Antonio as a whole doesn't have many beachfront hotels, it's just a quick hike down the hill to Playa Bisans, which is a really calm, nice beach. Or you can get a taxi into town and the main beach, Playa Espadia there.
Yeah.
But Parador is a very large resort, three pools, many good restaurants, an adults only section as well. So you can kind of get that adults only seclusion there. And really, really spectacular property.
The couple of times I've been there, it's really quite unique because obviously there's so much competition, right? In Costa Rica, everywhere you go, Manuel Antonio's been around the destination. There's always new villas, rentals, new hotels going up, renovations everywhere. Parador always seems to have this classic vibe as when it first opened, maybe over 25 years. I'm not sure how old the property is, but it's got the real rustic European pirate vibe with these interesting statues and sail ships. And you've got some of the old classic mixed with the modern new building that they have. Like you mentioned, the adult only section, different pools, the kind of old school classic spa when it was first built. So it doesn't, with a funicular as well, really kind of has its own charm. And I always thought the food was really good. So yeah, really
Very
interesting
good.
one and a lovely mention to Parador. Okay, guys, fantastic. Well, we've covered an awful lot of information. Last question, super quickly. Personal preferences. Melissa, if you had to choose, you've got a week away. Are you going to a boutique hotel or an all-inclusive? Be honest.
I love the boutique properties. Yeah, I think it's just really a great way to experience Costa Rica, and it forces you a little bit to get out of the resort, or not resort, the smaller property, to explore a little bit and check out the local area, which I think is a lot of the charm of Costa Rica. And Costa Rica is really safe too. I think a lot of times people veer towards all-inclusive, just, not knowing a new country or new destination, but even traveling as a solo female traveler, feel very comfortable and safe exploring outside of the property. So I think the boutique experience is really nice for both while you're there and exploring the country.
Very good. Jack?
I'm kind of in the middle. I like resorts and boutique hotels. I think a resort kind of like Parador or Nayara, like I mentioned, would be my go-to. Something that's like a resort, has more amenities and more restaurants per se on site, but you can still venture off-site. It's not all inclusive. That would be my go-to.
Really good answer. Really interesting. It's funny because we get to test a lot of hotels, luckily, in our jobs, right? I know when we have a long weekend, sometimes the longer I've been doing it, it's really nice to go to one place and disconnect without the need to want to explore more if you've been to similar areas. So sometimes the idea of a resort, like go to the Springs Resort or the Western, you can stay on site and have a great relaxing time for a number of days and just feel like you're disconnecting with the amenities immediately there. But then if you do want to explore further afield, you've got that mentality of, okay, I'm going to check out these wonderful places for the first time and explore. So everybody, it depends entirely on what you're looking for, right? Guys, I'm going to leave the last two links here in the chat, which are boutique hotels, as Melissa just mentioned, and more of our all-inclusive resorts. So do feel free to check out those links and let us know what you think. But let's have a look at some of the questions, guys. Thank you for staying on this long, for those of you that have stayed. I hope you found it helpful. Let's start in order. So Constance asked us right at the beginning. I'll start with you, Melissa. Throw it over to you. What would you recommend for two mid-50s couples, no kids, for a week over New Year's Eve?
So two kind of style options. If you're looking to celebrate, go out, enjoy, have kind of more active things going on for New Year's Eve, and you're looking for an all-inclusive, the Westin, Planet Hollywood, those will have a lot going on. If you really want to avoid children and have kind of a more peaceful getaway, just start the year fresh with the two of you. Secrets, very nice, very peaceful, right on the beach, and Azura as well, avoiding the kids, still having that beach experience, nice and peaceful, but still plenty to do for the celebrating the new year.
Really good point. And Constance, if you're thinking about it, maybe we've had a conversation, you're thinking, oh, you know what, maybe I could explore somewhere else. You can get in touch with us, and you can mix up your vacation. You can go into a couple of different options. But what I would say, if you do reach out, do think about trying to book it early, because you're looking at New Year's. You've got the Christmas week and the New Year week. They're the two single busiest weeks in the country. And we really recommend booking at least 9-10 months in advance, so that you can try and get your first choice of hotels. Costa Rican Vacations does book a certain amount of allotments with some of our best partners, so we can guarantee a better experience, but they will always book up fast. So, if you are thinking about it, get in touch with us and we will help you out right away. Laura's asking, Jack, are there any eco-friendly all-inclusive options?
So on the topic of eco-friendly all-inclusive, it is interesting because the all-inclusive resorts tend to have a lot more rooms than even the resorts. Like I said, like the Tamarindo Diria has a little over 100 or 200 rooms, whereas the Westin JW Dreams, they have over 400 rooms, and is a little harder to be eco-friendly when you have so many rooms. But on that front, an eco-friendly all-inclusive, I would recommend our boutique hotels that are meal inclusive. Those are certainly eco-friendly and will give more of that all-inclusive option at an eco-friendly property.
Yeah, really, really good answer. Especially if you do want to have a more environmental, the positive impact on your vacation. But I would also say, being in Costa Rica, I do think that there are certain protocols that even resorts have kind of put into place to be more efficient and eco-friendly with the environment, in terms of waste management, water management, electricity, lights on, off. So even if you don't necessarily feel it in an all-inclusive, I remember a couple of years ago, one of the Holiday Inns here in Escazú in the Central Valley was technically gifted 5 leaves. It was very sustainable in terms of how they managed waste, electricity, and they really reduced it a lot. So even though it was a brand hotel, a city hotel, there were still things they could do to be more efficient on the back end. And I know, as a country, a very green, forward-thinking country, they do try and implement that many times, as it is kind of on the mind of the traveler. So certainly something to think about for sure. Good stuff. Pablo has sent me a list here of eco-sustainable packages. So if you guys are interested, I will share that on the link, so you can double check a few more there. We addressed the question, anonymous, about most of the resorts being by the beach over the rainforest. Jessica, again, finally get to you. Jessica, thank you for your question. Melissa, what about younger kids like toddlers? Are there activities or childcare for children under 2? I'm fascinated. My child right now, she's 2 years, 4 months, running around. So it's a question I'd like answering. Where should I go? And where should Jessica go with toddlers?
I would say for toddlers, 2 options. The Westin is great for younger kids. They do actually even offer babysitting as well for an extra fee, so they can do that in room. Or if you want to go with your toddler, they have lots of fun activities at that little kids club. There's arts and crafts, there's music area, there's different things that they can do and have a really good time. Plus, that beach is very safe. The shells are fascinating to just like pick up and look at for little kids. So I think that's a good option. And then for not all-inclusive, the Diria, as Jack mentioned previously, it does actually have a small kids club now as well. And the pool there, my favorite pool, is lagoon style. So it's 0 entry, really easy in and out for younger kids and moms or families. There's a little kind of waterfall under one of the bridges. So just on site, there's a lot to do. And in that town as well, there's little farmers market, local things to explore. So that's an all-inclusive option, as well as one that's just a resort without the all-inclusive.
Yeah, really good feedback there. And I think I'm just thinking out loud. I've obviously been, the JW Marriott has a kids club as well. So daycare options. The Andaz has a really good one. So there are, if you don't want necessarily the all-inclusive and you are thinking about resorts, some of the best ones that we manage do have access to daycare centers, right? So even if the parents do want to escape for a couple of hours, you can do so, but so many things to do with your kids. Yeah, and the point about Conchal is great. And I think it's worth mentioning that not all properties are like directly on the beach. The Western is, the W is at the end of the same beach. So you can walk from the property to the sand. There is a very small road with Margaritaville, just, you know, in terms of safety, getting your kids to the sand, and you don't just let them wander, especially if you're a toddler. Guess that's my new dad head thinking about these things. Jack, Gary has been in touch. Gary, thank you for all your questions. He's got a bunch of questions. Let me see if I can summarize a couple of them together. Looking for a family spot with 4 rooms, 8 adults and 4 grandchildren. Ideally would like poolside for grandchildren, so they have the 4 rooms close by. Would you suggest upgrading a drink package for better spirits? Sometimes different levels at different services. But in total, we've got 12 people going. Is there a group rate? Considering March, spring break 2026. And is that a hard time to travel? It's a lot of questions, but very detailed. Thanks, Gary.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm looking through them. So Gary, I would, for poolside rooms and a great family experience, Margaritaville has some great poolside rooms where you go out on the outdoor area, you step right up and the pool's right there. So that would be really great for a poolside room that you're looking for. Drink packages, it depends on the resort for drink packages. The Westin does have different levels. Margaritaville, like I just said, does not. They just have the bed and breakfast or all-inclusive option. 12 people, we can give you a special discount for a group rate for 12 people. And March 2026, it's not a hard date to get right now, but if you wait until, say, after summer and you're going into fall, it might be a little tight on space, certainly.
Great response. Yes, a solid answer. I remember if you think about booking September and October, that's where the February and March dates start to close up really quickly. And we're working right now to get all the dates for next year's. The group discount, as Jack mentioned, could be a real help for you guys. It is interesting that if you were thinking about the Western, the pools, the rooms are not that close to the pool, so they're not poolside. So these are the things we can't always guarantee which room you get. But if you have the poolside rooms, like you mentioned, the Margaritaville, that might be a decision breaker for you guys. So Gary, hopefully that was helpful. Get in touch with Jack and he can start planning that for you now. An anonymous question here, Melissa, which I think we kind of touched on. If I have any food allergies or special dietary needs, how easy is it for that? Pretty easy, right? As long as they
and the other thing with us, we can also leave a special note in your reservation so that all the providers are aware, not only the resorts, but also if there's an excursion that has lunch included, we can take care of that ahead of time to make sure that you have an option that fits your dietary restrictions.
Yeah. And I always think, obviously, we would send the same note to all-inclusive and larger resorts. They do see people. If you do happen to travel to a boutique hotel or a smaller resort, not going to be treated any differently, but it's definitely going to be very, very clear because they have fewer guests, right? The final question here from Heather White. This is pretty cool. Heather's looking to come for her 40th birthday in June. She wants to see a volcano and do some ATVing. What's the best location? Heather, I celebrated my 40th birthday last June and I went to Colombia. It was a lot of fun. We also operate Namu Travel. But Jack, where should Heather go to celebrate the Big 4-0 this year?
Yeah, if you're not tied to the beach, I'd recommend the Arenal volcano. I think it's great for adventure and seeing a volcano, getting in some hot springs. But if you want to be at the beach and be able to go do a day trip to a volcano, I'd recommend somewhere up in Guanacaste, one of these great resorts that we did.
Yeah, and if you are in Guanacaste and want to mix it up and you don't want to go as far to the Arenal volcano, which is definitely number one, we do have the Rincon de la Vieja volcano, and there's lots to do around there. You've got hot springs, it's about an hour and a half away from most resorts, so it's a really fun day trip. But yeah, Heather, if you're able to come down, go to Arenal, adventure capital of Costa Rica. The ATVing there is great. You can find ATVs as well on the coast, but being in the rainforest, stopping with the incredible volcano views will be an experience. And then maybe you want to mix it up with somewhere else. So yeah, have a great time, get in touch. And I think we should do a webinar just on the Arenal volcano and adventure activities very soon, because there's an awful lot to cover. Guys, thank you so much for those of you that have stayed to the end. Melissa, Jack, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. You've been extremely helpful. I'm going to go ahead and put both of your links here in the chat. our TCs for today, our travel consultants. So if you want to reach out to Jack or Melissa, you can do so. There's their emails, and you can also check out their bios on the Costa Rican Vacations website as well. Please don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. That goes out twice a month, and I will always have a link to our monthly webinars as well. Very soon, we're going to start an internal webinar with our team that manages our lead interest. So everybody that wants to come and have a vacation, we are going to be doing more questions and answers soon. So watch this space, stay in touch, get in touch. Even if you're not thinking about booking, you can fill in the form, you can get in touch with our consultants and just get in that dreaming phase so that you can be connected to Costa Rican Vacations. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Adam. I really
Guys,
enjoyed
until
it.
next time, see you in April. Hasta la próxima. See you very soon.
Pura vida.
Pura
Bye.
vida.